This meeting to order. It is 1 p.m. It is Tuesday, February 25th, 2020. This is the superintendent's workshop. So at this time, I am going to turn this over to Dr. Moore, and he can, if you would like to introduce your staff that's with you today. We have some new faces.
Absolutely. I am excited to do that, Madam Chair. As you know, the second board meeting in January was the opportunity to bring on, the first board meeting in February, opportunity to bring on two new staff members. They have fully transitioned from their previous places of employment and are now joining our team. They both have hit the ground running and really digging into this work, being part of the transformation and establishing Indian River School District as a district that will be leading the nation in regards to what it looks like to meet the needs of students in 21st century learning. So I am excited to have each of these two new team members here with us today. First, our Deputy Superintendent, Scott Bass, who's been here just over a week now. This is actually his fifth day here, who is leading operations and HR, as well as Mr. Rick Meyer, who's coming from the state of Florida. He's been here just a week longer, so he's a veteran. Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction. So to have a team here, along with the other outstanding individuals that I've had the opportunity to meet, is truly rewarding. Looking forward to working shoulder to shoulder to push through some really big initiatives in order to improve and reform what teaching and learning looks like here in Indian River County. Thank you.
So your first presentation I have is the African American Achievement Plan.
Yes, ma'am. Through the chair, I have 4 items to present today. The first is the African American Achievement Plan. I do have a presentation, if it pleases the board, that I would like to move through before I answer any questions that you may have.
Okay.
This is a body of work that was very appealing to me, having the opportunity to have influence within a community regarding equity, regarding quality instructional programming that meet the needs of all students, regardless of where those students reside, was something that I really wanted to be a part of, something that really called or spoke to my heart. So to have the opportunity to join this team and this community, really to bring equity to the forefront, is something that I am excited to be a part of and excited to work with. Upon arriving in January, this is the first big body of work that I had to step into and put my shoulder to in order to ensure that we were putting equity at the forefront. Equity was something that was established by this board as a priority. This board speaking in one voice that this is something that needs to be done, and it needs to be done with fidelity, and we need to ensure that we're being open, we're being honest, we're being transparent with where we currently are regarding some very complex and in some cases uncomfortable situations, but to lead the work. Not to get around the work or not to move away from it, but to embrace it, to understand where we are as a community, and really begin to organize ourselves in a way, organize our community in a way to ensure that we have equity in every classroom across this district. So I will present a plan to you today that speaks through just that, the intent to address equity for all students. In beginning this work, we wanted to establish why and how. So this was some guiding principles that we established early on in beginning this work. First is to have a high expectation, an expectation that all children can learn and that we can clearly communicate and maintain environments in which all students can find success. We wanted to speak to high expectations everywhere we were, whether it was in schools or whether it was in the community. We have high expectations for all members of our organization and those who we serve, our students. Next is equity, is ensuring that we understood the definition of equity and we understood the structures and systems that needed to be in place to support what equity is. I've had the opportunity to meet in a number of different community forums, 35 to date. I've had the opportunities to meet with principals just this past, I want to say Thursday it was, talking through equity, presenting them with the expectation that I have, supported by your expectation regarding what equity means and how we design ourselves as a system to address equity. Transparency. Transparency is a need on how we do this work. One of the pushbacks or one of the conversations in speaking to members of our community was just that, transparency, a willingness to fully understand the problem, a willingness on behalf of staff and principals in the district to share information. If we're truly going to make some headway, and we are going to make some headway, we need to have open and honest conversations. And just not conversations in our school, but conversations in the community. Just last night, had the opportunity to participate in our 14th, not town hall meeting, but our focus groups. And we took it to the Gifford Youth Achievement Center and had the opportunity to engage with a number of community members and learned a lot. Transparency, once again, was a theme that glared its ugly head, but it's not an ugly head, it's a pretty head. It's a way of doing the work. So once again, we will be transparent, we will be open and honest. This will take time. We need to establish relationships. As we hear, Mr. Brown from the NAACP told me last night, he's still cautiously optimistic, and I work to keep him optimistic. Accountability. Accountability is something that I ask for from this board. As I interviewed, as I go through, as I sit on the dais, accountability is key to improving or moving an organization forward. Any individual in this organization who doesn't embrace accountability, who isn't internal, or who doesn't have the opportunity to reflect through implementation, to reflect through behaviors, interactions, can't grow. As an educational organization, we fundamentally need to ensure we're constantly learning as adults. We can't learn unless we have a sense of accountability to the work in which we've been charged to do. So holding ourselves accountable to our behaviors, our actions, our words, our structures, our systems are key in moving this work forward. And then finally, collaboration. I have no interest in doing this work in a silo. I have no interest in doing this work alone. I have every desire of working for a board and a team, some of which are here today, to walk shoulder to shoulder in the community, in schools, throughout the community, speaking of the truth and the reality. Some of the things that were mentioned in the feedback session last night was to be more aggressive in the community about this collaboration and some of the barriers that impede us as a community. And I'm looking forward to working with the community to lead that charge. A quick look back in terms of this work. As you know, in November, there was a joint meeting with the school board and the African American Achievement Committee working through what would be the plan. It was a positive meeting by all accounts. In December, we submitted to the courts the annual update plan that was required. That did not go over too well. There was a lot of concern and pushback regarding some of the content that was in that plan and the level of transparency and some of the things that I mentioned in the previous slide. Upon starting the position in January, my very first Friday was an opportunity to go back with the NAACP president and sit in a federal courtroom and listen to a judge. That happened in January. Set a very clear expectation in which was embraced by both myself on behalf of this board as well as the NAACP, that we can work shoulder to shoulder, that we are committed in doing this work together. The judge reinforced to us that this is complex, hard work, in which sometimes if you're doing it correctly, there are going to be some very difficult conversations that need to be had. And we both acknowledge that. She had mentioned that she offered or proffered a mediator closer to home for us if that need be the case. We both said we think it's time for us to get lawyers out of the way and work together and do this work. And that is what we have been doing since returning that first Friday for me in January. Working together with the joint committee, they met later in the month. They established or reestablished themselves as a committee, which is a requirement that they have to do. And we began to work through what would be the plan that is in front of you today to be approved this evening. It is a plan in which a lot of blood, sweat, and tears has gone into. And I have to pause and thank Ms. Dampier for her consistency, her professionalism, her persistence in meeting with me, in meeting with each member of the Joint Committee multiple times, going out in the community with me, really to have a clear understanding of what content, what information needs to be in this, so it's not the district's plan, but the community's plan. And we have made some significant headway in regards to claiming this as being the community's plan. It is significantly different, and we'll talk through some of the highlights that are in this work. I'm like, did someone put me on the timer?
Time.
Not that I don't need it. That work that I'm describing now, that Ms. Dampier and I, along with a number of people in this district office as well as principals engaged in, has taken place over the last 2 months. This wasn't a quick revision of a previous plan. This was not, hey, let's get a plan from Pinellas County and just modify it. It was taking the time to say, what is unique to this particular county? What is unique to Indian River County? And how do we design a plan that we can begin to implement to continue to ensure that we're moving the needle? I have said from the beginning, this plan should have been approved or should have gone before you at the beginning of this particular school year. We are now walking into March and we don't have this plan approved. This plan will be approved this evening. We will begin to implement, and we will bring a significantly modified or enhanced plan to you over the summer. I say enhanced or modified because as we begin to implement, it is designed in a way that we're continuously reflecting on that implementation to shift or modify our practice, our behaviors, our interactions in order to ensure this plan continuously grows. Not a plan that goes on the shelf, not a plan that just makes sure we do the minimum, but a plan that inspires us to act, inspires us to reflect, inspires us to refine and modify and learn from implementation to improve the practices and services that we provide to our children. So I am looking forward to getting to work, getting to the implementation piece of this work. There are some things that are different about this plan. I'll highlight just a few for the board, and we'll dig in as deep as you would like to in any conversation following this presentation. There are clearly established priorities. This has been a priority that you set upon my arrival, even through the interview process, and I have set and reinforced that priority. So much so that every person's name who appears in this plan, whether they are by name or by position, principal, part of their evaluation will be the opportunity to sit and speak through the implementation steps within this particular plan. It becomes a priority and it becomes a district-wide plan. Whereas before it was seen as the district's plan, this is the community's plan, this is the principal's plan, this is all of our plans. Increasing the transparency. We have developed a web page. I'll highlight some of that web page in the coming slides just to give you a better understanding of our willingness and desire to be transparent regarding this conversation. Also, in regards to transparency, monthly updates. I've committed to provide an update to you once a month, typically during the second board meeting of the month, in regards to where we are in terms of implementation, the impact that we have had, and any changes or shifts or modifications that are taking place based on that implementation. Just not a presentation of, hey, here's what we've done, we feel good. Here's what we've done, here's what we learned, and here's how we're shifting or modifying our practice or behavior to improve that outcome. This is not a laundry list. This is not a checklist. This is an opportunity for us to engage in deep dialogue regarding our behaviors, our actions, to improve outcomes for all children. So other things that are different: identified goals and strategies and action steps for each school. So each school, regardless of where that school resides, will have the opportunity to design and develop their plan based on the plan that is before you. The data session. So we've had 2 deep conversations with principals regarding outcome, connecting those outcomes to instructional practice, digging in deep by subgroup, looking at ESSA requirements, looking at individual teacher growth, and looking at student growth, and having the bold, courageous conversation regarding the impact we are having with children in our classrooms. In some cases, those are uncomfortable conversations. Those are data points that have not been discussed yet. Some may say those are taboo, but you know what? They are not. The truth is the truth, the reality is the reality, and the data will set you free. So we are having those conversations, and in respect to our principals who are fully connected and committed to doing this work, there's development that we need to provide. This is no longer a district that just points its finger and says, go and do this, go and write this plan, give me an action plan by this particular date. It is us in schools, working with them, supporting them to do what is extremely complex work. We want to ensure principals have the opportunity to receive feedback firsthand. Our secondary principals will establish their own advisory council, African American Advisory Council, which will allow them to hear firsthand the impact that their particular culture, their environment is having as an opportunity to learn or shift or modify practice based on those conversations and that dialogue. We will work to eliminate out-of-school suspension. I come from an organization that stopped suspending students and sending them home to learn nothing and not be supervised 5 years ago. And we need to surround or organize our community in a way, organize our schools in a way that we maximize every teachable moment, that we have programming in place before the behavior is displayed that yields a suspension. And then when those behaviors are displayed, because they will be displayed, how are we empowering them with the skills and the ability to cope through and have conversations to solve problems, to identify conflict or potential conflict, and they have the skills that we have supported both inside our schools and within our community to ensure students have those skills to reduce or eliminate the behaviors that lead to what was in Indian River County an out-of-school suspension. We will phase that plan in, being very intimate with that same work in Miami. I was able to learn a great deal regarding how you phase that in. There are things we need to be doing at our schools, looking at our in-school suspension model, looking at our social-emotional support systems, our proactive systems, a lot of work taking place leading into the summer, over the summer, and over the course of next year, so we can ultimately eliminate out-of-school suspension. Still working on the new language here. In our secondary schools, implementing a plan to ensure our student services, our school counselors are working with our students, ensuring they are on track to graduate. Being very intentional of not assuming because you have C's, everything is fine, but forcing counselors to have the intimate conversations, connecting them with children to have those conversations. One of the things that you'll note, the PowerPoint says, it doesn't say secondary schools, it says counselors, and that was in some ways a misprint because elementary schools don't have school counselors. And I'm going to leave that silent, awkward pause right there. And then finally, our tiered intervention of support, really looking through that tiered approach under the leadership of Mr. Meyer, digging into the fidelity of implementation, ensuring that we are providing focused interventions academically and behaviorally for our students before we rush to identifying them as ESE or having an exceptionality. There is some disparity there. regarding that particular data in comparison to other counties as well as the state. Team is working through those plans right now to ensure that before we move to assessing the child, we can say that we have implemented that intervention with fidelity. And that, once again, will be work that continues moving into the summer and moving into the next school year. This is just some key points walking you through what is next for us. Some of it is just kind of accountability points. It's not necessarily around the action or implementation of the plan. We will be submitting a joint status report in March to the court. Once we have our results, we're going to schedule what I call a 2-day conference with the joint committee, really disaggregate that data, really have a protocol-driven conference to really dig into, understand that data, receive their feedback in preparation for what will be our new plan that will come to you prior to the opening of schools, which will be in August. Then once again, September, a status report, and then December, which would be the annual report. I think it's important to note that this isn't something that is being done as a result of we have a desegregation order or we're under partial unitary status. This is work that's important. I said in a community meeting, this is work that I would be doing even if we weren't under that order, because it's just that important. And really looking forward to digging in and engaging in this work, which will make us a richer, stronger community. Just to kind of highlight some of the work that we've done, changes in behavior, one of which goes back to transparency. This is a page that we have established. It contains a historical perspective regarding minutes from previous meetings. It has the plan as it is current in its current status, as well as opportunities to connect to data. One of the biggest rubs, as I said earlier, is around the accessing of information and the ability to disaggregate data, really to get to what is the root cause. And as we went through this plan and my desire to be transparent, we've included a lot of numbers. But we really want to begin to establish a data-savvy community. Ms. Dampier's idea was, let's begin to have workshops in the community around the ability to filter and use the data reports that we have. So I thought it was an absolutely outstanding idea. So one of the closing slides will be the first data session that we're having at the Gifford Youth Achievement Center, where we continue to have over a series continuously from month to month, really to build and answer questions, get a better understanding in regards to what's being asked for. Some of the things that we've done, just quick examples. This is on our webpage, the equity webpage, takes you to EdStats. All of you I know are familiar with EdStats. You can link through, filter down to the K-12 information. And as an example, you can go into English Language Arts. It pulls that data. That's a lot of information. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of data. Some who are very data savvy, who are really supporting us in having really good conversations. I enjoy some of the partners that some people might think that they're not partners, but they really are. They really, really are. And I've enjoyed having dialogue and conversations regarding their expertise in reality regarding this data. So we look forward to continuing to improve it and make it unique to us as a county. This is the progress report as we are calling it. The progress report identifies the goal area, identifies the barrier that it's being addressed, the action step that's being addressed, and the measure that we are using to attach to those goals, barriers, or action steps. Every implementation step does not directly connect to a particular piece of data, but multiple implementation steps have influence over the overall outcome. So this is what we will populate and present and bring back to you in March in our first presentation. You see where applicable, you'll have a 3-year trend. Then you'll have the progress monitoring that will take place over the course of the remainder of this year, and then ultimately our annual outcome. This is for each area. So we have it for the student achievement as well as the other two goal areas that are listed there. And then finally, that's the fourth area, I'm sorry. And then here is a completion log. This is just an example. It is filtered by date. It is just a check and balance because this is a big plan being implemented by a number of different individuals across a number of different locations. This will help the team identify and monitor the implementation as we move forward. So this will be a log that we keep, that I work with Cabinet regarding the implementation, that we're always working through on a proactive manner regarding the implementation. It is extensive, it is a lot, this is a lot of work. Therefore, it is an extensive plan that really highlights the work that we're doing. This highlights the diving into data meeting that we're having next Monday evening. I've already spoke through our intent to have that meeting. That is the presentation. The plan is extensive. I am excited to be moving to implementation. As I said, very proud of the team's willingness to come together around this work. Very proud of the community's response. Very proud of the community's patience and the probing and the review and the feedback that they have provided has made this plan better as a result of that interaction and that conversation. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Thank you for that thorough presentation. I'm going to open it up to questions, comments. Go ahead.
I have a few questions, if that's okay. I'm pulling, Dr. Moore, thank you for that really a wonderful presentation on where we stand and what we are expecting for the future. I am actually pulling up simultaneously the actual plan itself. It was, and it is included as a backup for the public. If you are online, you'll be able to pick it up. So these would work, the presentation that you have and the actual plan itself, they go together. They are not separate. This plan as the backup, which is the African American Achievement Plan, is what we are referring to when you're giving this presentation.
Through the chair,
Correct.
yes. The PowerPoint was my opportunity to keep myself focused in on the conversation. Reviewing a very, very lengthy plan probably would have doubled or tripled the time. So I'm just trying to pull out some key information. I know I've had the opportunity to keep you abreast of the shifts and changes over the course of the last 2 months. So the PowerPoint is simply to keep me focused and organized regarding the presentation.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that for the public because the actual plan is about 96 pages. So I just wanted the public to understand that the presentation is not the plan. The presentation is simply what to expect within the plan. But so my first question for you, or possibly statement, I know that you and I talked about this briefly, and Mr. Fagan and I talked about this at board members, at board meetings. I have mentioned this before. 4 action steps in the actual plan itself. When we're looking at the implementation of the plan, as an example, I am trying to scroll to section 2.1, or 2.2. There's a chart there. It says, and I only pulled that up as an example, but there's an action step, there's a number, evidence of completion, implementation timeline in the chart, and then responsible staff person, who is going to oversee that action step. Something that we talked about previously was a direct link to our district strategic plan. Above each chart, there is a line there that says aligned with the district strategic plan, and then there is a blank little white space there. My thought is that you're going to fill in there how it's linked to our district strategic plan. Is that right?
Thank you, through the chair. 100% correct. So as we are preparing a presentation to come to you on March 10th, which is the completion of Phase 2 of the 90-day plan, which is the data that we have gathered regarding the listening and learning segment, Phase 2, then we will move into what will be the design of our modification of our strategic plan. As we designed the strategic plan, we wanted to be intentional on the front end with this particular plan, ensuring that we did not forget about this work. So that box identifies how we will be intentional of linking this work into the strategic plan. So as we move and establish the district-wide strategic plan, it will require some intentional conversation regarding, are we covering everything in the African American Achievement Plan within our district strategic plan? It's just a intentional opportunity to avoid the opportunity of creating a silo or having multiple plans that do not overlap or do not coordinate with one another.
Yes, that was really one of the main purposes of me bringing that up, is because I don't want that to happen.
It will not.
And what we as a board really need to begin to, with you, Dr. Moore, and your team, is really begin to start looking at the strategic plan. How are we going to revise, edit some areas, maybe some wording needs to change moving forward, so that we're better aligned. And I've brought this up on previous occasions, so that, because some of the goals are not measurable goals. And so we really need to get that ball rolling so that we're not measuring something that's not measurable, basically.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm looking forward to bringing the findings to you on March 10th. It has been called a mini dissertation, but the findings are significant. There's a great deal of information, a great deal of conversations that we've had that will really allow us to gain a deeper understanding as to how this strategic plan needs to be designed. So as you're saying that, I believe you'll be very pleased with the presentation in our next board meeting.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Thank you. With regard to the African American Achievement Plan, something that we mentioned before, and maybe not right at this moment, but maybe when the revised plan comes to us in the summer, a consideration or something that would be easier for me personally is within this chart, or whatever you're going to bring to us, is to add 2 extra columns. But those 2 extra columns, and two, or maybe another format, it doesn't have to be 2 extra columns. But for each action step, oftentimes each action step is for a different item, okay? PD, for example. PD falls under 2.1 and 2.2. But the next one, 2.3, is referring to out-of-school suspension. So those are 2 different areas. So each action step may fall in a different place in the strategic plan. So if we added another column, maybe we could see for that line where that lined item or action step falls in our strategic plan. And then Mr. Fagan and I had this conversation too, a final column to link all of that to our budget. Where does that fall in our budget, so that we are able to see, are we covering it, are we not covering it, is that an area that we need to focus on? How are we linking all of these together? Prior to you coming on board, on staff, coming to the district, my concern has always been that we are doing things in reverse, and we should be doing it the other way around, where, last year, of course, this was a new board, 3 of us were new. We approved our budget, and did not have conversations with our strategic plan in mind, whereas it needs to be the other way around. Our strategic plan should drive the budget, not vice versa. And our focus, in my opinion, needs to happen that way. And that's the whole purpose of a strategic plan. Otherwise, it's just a piece of paper. So I'd like to see, you're smiling, I'd like to
but-
see the connections of those items.
Through the chair, I'm just smiling because we've had a number of conversations regarding the design of our strategic plan, the philosophy or structure, and you're capturing a number of things that we believe are priorities in what will become our new strategic plan. So I think you'll be very happy.
Awesome. So I'm ahead of myself then. Or behind you, rather.
Right.
And then my last item is just a simple reflection, a note that I had here when you mentioned coming to us in the summer would be a revised or a modified plan surrounded or as a result of reflection of this. We only really have 2.5 months of implementation before the end of the school year. Some of these items, I'm sure we might not be able to fully see implemented, but my assumption is that in the reflection, we'll be able to see that nonetheless. There'll still be some items for reflection for the new plan coming forward. That's probably a rhetorical statement, and you probably need not respond, but I'm still looking forward to that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Barrenborg?
Thank you. I have some specific questions on the plan. Thank you for a more revised plan, and thank you for so much input from the community and the Equity Committee. I think it's extremely important that we continue to do that, so I appreciate that. On page 3, it says each school will develop their own African American Achievement Plan to support students. Where will those be posted?
Through the chair, on that equity webpage.
Okay, so along with on each school's website? So if a parent wants to just look up their school's website, they can see it.
Through the chair, I haven't thought about that, but that's a good idea as well.
More than one place is awesome, isn't it? All right, on page 17, it says implementation timeline, October 31st for school improvement plans. Where are we with this year's SIPs as far as including this? Are we looking at those? Are we just saying, okay, we're going to start next year?
Through the chair,
Yeah, I said it, school improvement plan. I said that first.
so the work that we've done this year in kind of evaluating the reality of what school improvement plans were and how they were designed and implemented, or not being implemented, but just created, I thought it would be best to move forward. So we went through during our impact reviews, asked each school not to create something that they weren't implementing or shifted or modify it because it wasn't the reality, but to create a plan moving forward. That's what they've done. I have charged Mr. Meyer and his team to look at a school improvement plan that is unique to our needs. As I've told you, in where I came from, I do not believe that SIMS, a generic template that was designed
Bless you.
for, bless you, 67 different counties, meets the needs of any one particular county. I think we can do a better job. This is a perfect example of our unique needs in having this element, this plan, embedded into each school's school improvement plan. So
Yeah,
that-
I'm glad to
work
hear
is yet
that.
to be done.
Having been on that end of it, of creating a school improvement plan, like you said, it's a document that maybe somebody reads one time or 2 times and that's it. It's nice to see that it's becoming living and breathing and it's going to be connected to this district's plan. Are we having district then help with making those plans perhaps over the summer, getting together with principals and other people?
So through the chair, we will implement a summer PD series that will come to you, so you have all of that information later on and towards the end of the school year. We will spend a week with school site principals, assistant principals, and their leadership teams, disaggregating the data from the previous school year, really working through a problem-solving process to identify what did and didn't work, and then using that information through a protocol-driven process, really to begin to design their school improvement plan, identifying what were the root causes of the outcomes, what organizational shifts need to take place, How do you identify what your priorities are? And then how do you go back into your school at the beginning of the school year and build consensus to your faculty and staff? Of course, we can't bring the entire staff in over the summer, but we can bring in the key, most influential teacher leaders, those who represent the teachers, and ask them to be intentional regarding how are we going to build consensus and ownership towards these priorities that we've learned over the summer, really to design a plan that will be continuous over the course of the school year.
And I've been involved with that as well. I think it's a better way to handle that, but I think it's also good to have parent input on those plans.
Absolutely, which is.
Okay, so parents will be involved in that planning procedure. Okay, awesome. It says at the bottom of that page on 17 that we're going to have a rezoning study. Is that going to be put into our budget then, that we're looking at?
Through the
paying for
chair,
that?
just prior to me coming in, Dr. Moxley and Mr. Fagan presented the master plan presentation, which we've commissioned that work. When that comes back in, that will serve as a catalyst to have additional conversations regarding rezoning, the totality of where we need to consider additional thought. Is there anything you want to add?
Great, thank you. On page 23, talks about developing a training for school counselors to facilitate conversations with at-risk students for graduation. Where do the graduation coaches fit in? Because I didn't see them in this plan.
Through the chair, graduation coaches are monitoring kids over the course of that particular cohort. So if we're only working with students when they are seniors, then we're doing a disservice. We really need to ensure that our graduation coaches are looking at the resources, credit recovery, additional interventions, predicting services that need to be provided to students so they don't have to make up 5 or 6 particular credits. Some of the work around social emotional learning is vital. Some of the work around addressing or empowering children with the skills to solve problems is credential. So a graduation coach should be seen as a person who's going to predict the need for additional services for children, both to the school administration as well as whether it be themselves or school counselors.
Okay, so I didn't see them written in the plan. Will those be put into the SIPs then?
Yeah,
School improvement
yes.
plans?
And as
Okay.
it drills down, I think you'll see more intentional plans by school sites. The closer this plan gets to kids, the more powerful it'll be.
Awesome. On the backside of that, on page 24, it says implementing a plan that requires every school counselor to meet quarterly with at-risk African-American students to discuss their graduation needs. Is quarterly enough?
Through the chair, I don't know if quarterly is enough. That's not the intent. I think the intent is to ensure that eyes, feelings, and emotions are around these children, and when students who are not at risk, or students who are at risk, requires additional services. So to give you some assurances, if we go back and review the data and there's a child who is at risk of not graduating and a counselor tells me, well, I'm okay because I met with him one time, there's going to be a very difficult conversation that will be had.
Okay.
Because it's not okay. The intent is to identify where children need additional support, and as a result of that identification, we then provide them those services.
So we're going to have checks and balances. Awesome.
Absolutely.
On page 27, 1.3, it says universal screening for gifted. Can we have some sort of explanation or something put in there about who can identify? Often it starts with a classroom teacher, but quite frankly, I have seen over and over again where a child has not been considered for gifted because they have discipline issues. A lot of times their discipline issues are because they're turned off, because they're gifted. So will there be a way of other people being able to identify for giftedness?
Through the chair, I think you'll see that response when Ms. Dampier's office digs in and designs their plan in response to that. So once again, it'll get more granular as you move down. So
Okay.
But the answer to your question and your concern is 100% accurate.
Yeah, and the other thing that I've seen also is sometimes kids don't get identified, or they get identified but really not promoted because the school's worried about losing that really high kid because we don't have gifted services at every school. So what's the answer to that?
Through the chair, that'll be part of the information that will have to come back in our reorganization. So the fact that we don't have services for all kids in all schools is just yet another opportunity for improvement.
Right, and keep that in mind. I will say that that's always an issue that comes up in schools. It's a quandary for a parent as well. On page 29, the summer program that you're going to prepare African-American students. I know that we already have summer programs going on out there. Are we utilizing GYAC's summer program? Are we enhancing? Are we working with them? Are we not competing with them? What are we doing?
Through the chair, we'll bring that information to the board, I believe, March 10th. We'll cover that presentation. But we are expanding and designing some of our own programming that would be considered a bridge program as students walk into a new course or a new school, a higher, more rigorous curriculum, ensuring that they have the skills and the abilities to prepare themselves for that more rigorous curriculum, study habits, time management, those kinds of things.
Are we talking about just middle school kids going into high school? Or are we also talking about possibly kids going into middle school programs like that?
Through the chair, both.
Great. And then down that page, it says 1.42, implementation articulation at school levels to recognize support students for advanced coursework, especially moving from 5th to 6th grade. Can we start that conversation in 3rd grade? The reason why I bring that up is because I think I've shared a conversation I had with you about a recent parent that didn't know that we had these programs that were available to their child in 6th grade. Hardy made a decision as a 5th grader to go somewhere else instead of one of our schools for their programs and wish they had known about it before that.
Through the chair, I think that's some of the work that we're doing with our upcoming Magnet Fair. There are significant opportunities around articulation from the voice of students and meeting with them, as well as how we are assigning students to courses, not doing that in isolation, but opening up the chains of or lines of communication regarding where all students should fall, using multiple data points in order to ensure we're putting children in the most rigorous courses in which they can find success.
But we're targeting like even in 3rd grade for those?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then on page 34 and page 35, there's 2 programs, student-to-student mentorship and a bunch of other programs on here. And are we going to see research that supports those? Or, sometimes we see programs that work somewhere else and we just pop them in. We're looking at research-based that have worked somewhere else that we can prove results. We're not just throwing some stuff in because it looks good.
Through the chair, absolutely, have never done that, never will do that.
Thank you. Page 37. It's talking about current overall percentage of ESE services is 16%. Thank you for recognizing this. Percentage of African-American students identified as eligible for ESE services, 23%, pretty high. What's the state average? Because we've compared everything on the other pages to state, 14, so it would be nice to see the state comparison there. I have 2 other quick comments, 3 other. 4.1, it says offer incentives to African-American candidates. Do we have an idea of what incentives? Is that coming on March 10th? Are we looking at stipends? Or are we looking at something
Through the chair,
else?
as we begin to negotiate that out, those will be items that would come, yes.
Okay, so that's a negotiation. Okay. And then budget as well. And then the last one on page 53, 4.28, it says create a committee with the purpose of reviewing opportunities for affordable housing. Can we change that to workforce housing?
Through the chair, I should have caught that, yes.
Okay, and also, we talked about as a board last time, creating a time where we can meet to discuss forming a committee for that. At what point, Chair, would you like to discuss a date? Because I looked at March 3rd as a possibility. It's an open date. And that would also give us time for Dr. Moore to prepare for the board meeting the following week for things that we may not be able to discuss, that he could also add the workshop time for that.
We have school board training that day.
March 3rd? March 10th is school board
FSBA.
training.
March 10th?
Yeah.
Nothing's on the 3rd?
Mrs.
Do you want to
Branford,
discuss that another time?
Why don't we'll add that tonight for
Okay.
discussion. and we
That's
can
fine. I'm done. Thank
do
you.
that.
but I'm happy to wait.
No, I'm fine, please. A number of my questions were answered by Mrs. Barrenborg. I enjoy hearing the questions that my other board members have.
Okay. I have some questions and some comments. First off, I want to step back as this is Mr. Meyer and Mr. Dr. Bass? Mr., sorry. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Delighted. We've only met very briefly, so thank you for being here. To Dr. Moore on that, thank you for the initiative in building up your cabinet. Thank you for the quality of the people that you've hired. Thank you for not simply bringing up your people from Miami and building our district to replicate Miami, because while we're borrowing a lot of the things from Miami, we're not Miami.
Right.
So I want to acknowledge that. And then I want to say something a little difficult, which I've said in private, but I'm going to say in public. I really appreciate your attention to equity. We've had a lot of conversations about this. It's an issue I bring up a lot. I acknowledge and recognize the strength that you bring in of building a strong cabinet. And I am very much looking forward to, as we build out the cabinet and high levels of administration, that we include equity in that as well. So I want to make sure it's publicly acknowledged, that that's something I'm also
Absolutely.
looking forward to how you will bring that to our district.
Absolutely.
This conversation is also particularly relevant in light of the conversation we'll have this evening as we have the public hearing for the school board racial equity policy, which I hope we will then proceed to pass. So this is a timely conversation and a timely day. I'm going to move forward with some specific comments, some general comments, some specific comments that are going to be a little all over. I particularly appreciate you also acknowledging that this is not just the district's plan, but it's the community's plan. We continue to talk about, and we haven't done as good a job in the past as I know we will do in the future, of building collaborative models rather than adversarial ones. And so I am delighted to hear how much you're out in the community, how much you're referencing community input, and how much we acknowledge that in the work moving forward, that this is not simply our work. So thank you for, again, raising it specifically in this context. About the plan itself, and I'll just say very few specific comments on it because we've gone back and forth on this a lot. This plan, I want to acknowledge the work of everyone who's had a hand in it. It is light years different than the plan that was brought to us in August. You've done, everyone has done a monumental amount of work to transform this plan from what it looked like in August to what it looks like now. I am deeply grateful for your attentiveness to this issue. I don't think I can say that strongly enough. You've been on board for, what, 25 days? I don't know what it's been.
A little bit more than that.
Something like that.
Just 2 months.
But you have made a point in most conversations in the community, in our board meetings, of continuing to highlight over and over again that this is your work, that this is our work, and this is the reason you're here. So thank you for that. Not the only reason, but certainly a large part of it. There are still things in this plan that, to be honest, I'm not overjoyed with. And we've had a bunch of conversations about that, acknowledging that this is a dynamic and evolving plan. This is not a finished product. This is a starting place. So I will vote to approve it tonight, even acknowledging that I could go back and forth and nitpick on any number of things, as you've seen me do. But we need to have that starting point, and I know that we'll continue to enhance and improve this moving forward. So I am going to give everyone the luxury of not the level of nitpick that I do and the level of perfection that I do for myself and others. I am hoping also that as we move forward with this, and this is particularly for Mr. Meyer, that not only in the areas here, but as we go through curriculum, as we go through instruction, that we will be particularly attentive to the ways in which equity and culture and all of those things are represented in every aspect of our curriculum. I know you'll be attentive to that moving forward. I know we'll support you in that. But it's an area that it's very easy for us to overlook because we use fairly standard texts and fairly standard materials that are always, not always as attentive to some of these issues as they could and should be. So I, for one, will be 100% supporting you in that in whatever way that I can. Also in this plan, I want to highlight what I particularly appreciate, and you've spoken about before, is the accountability structures. This work means nothing if we are not also building in levels of accountability throughout the district. Because it really doesn't matter what we say, it matters what we do and how we're held accountable for that. So thank you for ensuring that that is built through all of the levels of this plan. My notes are kind of all over the page here. So, couple of simple kind of nitpicky things, because I continue to bring this up. I'm not going to bring up all of them.
We got rid of,
That what?
so we got rid of the percentage points.
We did. I wasn't even going to bother mentioning that because I've said it so many times. Yes, I did notice that got fixed. What didn't happen in here, and I know that you know it's an issue, and I know that you'll be looking at it. It's just not specifically stated in here, that there are a number of places, and for example, on I think it's page 11, I have. Yeah, as an example, under student discipline, when we talk about number and percent of African-American students receiving ODRs, number and percent of African-American students receiving out-of-school suspensions, we've talked about this privately, right? But number and percent of what? And that continues to nag at me. Is it number and percent of total students? Is it number and percent of African-American students? Is it number and percent in comparison to white students? For me, number and percent as an isolated figure isn't meaningful unless we're asking in comparison to what. So I believe that that's probably going to be reflected on the benchmark indicators and in other places, but it doesn't read that way here. So I am always looking for clarification when we say number and percent, because in isolation it doesn't mean anything. It's just a number and a percent. It only means something in comparison where we are able to identify disparity, and we can only identify disparity when we're comparing it, in this case specifically to white students, but also to percentage in the population, et cetera. What are we going to, how is that going to be addressed?
Through the chair, it will be updated moving forward. I think when we give the first presentation regarding the outcomes or the progress monitoring, you'll see some very, very powerful data presented in comparison to the whole, because you are 100% correct. When you look at suspensions and you see the percent of African-American males that are being suspended, it may not seem alarming, but when you compare it to the total population in comparison to the total percent of suspensions, it is glaring. So there are opportunities really to be extremely transparent regarding the totality of the data and completely explaining this is the impact of those numbers. And those were conversations that we had that we began to add. So you'll see those coming back to you as we move to build, as we grow the plan.
I know I'm struggling a little because I want to see it here in ABC format. Because we're not addressing disparity unless we're looking simultaneously at the rates across, cutting the numbers in a whole bunch of different ways. Because it doesn't tell us anything, for example, if number and percent of African-American students receiving ODRs is going down, if it's going down at a greater rate for white students, if it's going down at a rate proportionate to the rate in the population, et cetera. So I am going to step back a minute from my data wonkness. But what I really want to see is number and percent, A as compared to this, B as compared to that, C as compared to the other thing. So.
Understood.
Let me see, I have a note, page 23. Again, I'm not going to go through this in as, example, not just number. Oh, the other thing in this, and again, I'm, without going through every single one, because these are things that repeat. In a lot of places, the action step is, for example, number of meetings with, right? So number of meetings with students, number of meetings with students and parents. while the number of meetings is significant in telling us we're paying attention, it doesn't tell us anything about the content and what we're looking for. Again, I'm sure that will be presented in the outcome, but telling me that you had, that somebody had a meeting with somebody simply is a tick mark on a chart. It doesn't actually tell me what happened in that meeting, what was the outcome of that meeting, how it was productive. And while it's hard to get that level of specificity into a report like this, I raise concern when what I see as a measure is bean counting. We had 10 meetings, therefore we've handled it. Well, if the 10 meetings were not effective, we haven't handled it. So how do we work that in here? And reassure me.
So, through the chair, I think that is why I am so eager to get to implementation and have the scaffolded approach of development of plans leading up to support what is a plan that supports the entire district, all of the schools. What you will see is not just the implementation, but the impact of implementation, which I continue to talk through. But this is a model that isn't just reporting back outcome. It's reporting back the shift or change of practice. So to build on what Ms. Berenborg was saying, we are at the point where we need to require that meeting, which is sad.
Good point.
The follow-up from that meeting is where I need to report to you and the community and the parents, I forced the action, which is sad. But the follow-up is where I need to be held accountable. And as a result of that interaction, we were able to shift or modify the student's schedule so he could recover that particular course. We were able to refer him to an outside agency to provide additional services. That is the kind of information that's coming back. It's just not simply numbers. This is a process that we have refined, or I have refined over the last 7 years, that really forces us to improve our organizational intelligence regarding how we are learning from outcomes, just not looking at numbers and yes, we did it, no, we didn't do it. That's not good enough. What is good enough is what do we learn from it and how do we improve it? And those are the kinds of conversations that we will be able to bring to life when I'm giving these updates, which is the struggle, to be very honest, that I have, and I've tried to communicate both to the joint committee and each of you. Let me get to implementation and let me show you the power and purpose of this level of thinking and the kinds of reports that I will provide in the intimate level in which I will be able to speak for all schools regarding this plan, because it's truth and it's real. So this is, I see it, and sometimes I know exactly where you're going and trying to look through your lens. I have the same struggles. That's why I begin the presentation, even before we got to design, saying this is going to be significantly different when we're empowering principals and school sites with process. Process leads to change and improvement in behavior.
Good answer. And for exactly those reasons is why, despite that there are things that I feel we're not there yet in here, is why, you're right, we have to get to implementation. We can't hold this up anymore. I'd live out really quick. I am hoping that as we move forward, we've referenced the strategic plan, and I know Mrs. Rosario talks about it all the time. I support that. I kind of can't wait to dive into that. We haven't yet quite talked through how that process is going to go. What I'm hoping is that that's going to be a very collaborative process between you, whoever on your team for the different areas, and the board. As a board, while we rely on you for guiding the day-to-day stuff, as a board, that's our job, right? The vision, the mission, how we create a strategic plan. And so I know you're going to bring forward some ideas, some beginning steps in that in March. What I'm hoping that we'll do is not only have a board workshop, but, and this is something we'll have to talk about as a board, but that we will have a day, a whole day, a workshop day, to really dig into this together. It is, there are a few things as important as this document guiding the future of this district and how we do that together as a governance team and as leaders in this district. So I really want us to be able to dig into that, and I want to make sure that we allow sufficient time together to do that.
Through the chair, and I think that is the absolute right work that a board and a superintendent should be doing. That is the work that will give us focus. That is the work that will pave the way for where we want to go. I am very excited to turn the page and give you this presentation, which is simply at this point, hey, this is a deep analysis of what we have learned through listening, the evaluation of outcomes. And all the outcomes that we're evaluating really are a year old. But in listening to our customers, in listening to our parents, in listening to our teachers and principals, these are key areas that are, if we don't address within our strategic plan, it will just become that document on a shelf. And the design will be very innovative and creative in staggering out what we address, when we address, what the outcome will be over the course of time, the alignment of the different bureaus within the district down to school sites, really a comprehensive approach really to move us at a very, very fast pace. So very excited to begin to share out that work and design that plan with the board.
Last comment. And my last comment, and this is really in the form of a suggestion, because this is your job, not mine. But I'd like to suggest moving forward, I really appreciate that you have put on the website the Office of Equity and Instructional Support. I'd like to suggest a slight tweak for your consideration, which is the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Instructional Support. While we are looking at this moment at equity, and this is tied into our equity plan, I'd like to suggest that the role of that office is also about inclusion of all marginalized, all excluded, kids, adults, and how we address their needs. So it's not just about equity, but it's also about inclusion of a variety of populations that we don't always sufficiently attend to their needs. So just as a suggestion moving forward.
Mrs. Justice?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that final comment, Dr. Schiff. I remember when we were discussing the African American Achievement Plan with Dr. Moxley, that at that point, when we started to look forward at making decisions, I had some reticence about any concrete plans being made because I did want Dr. Moore to join us. At that point, we didn't know it was going to be you, but we're happy to have you here, and welcome to your new team members. At that point, I did express that concern that perhaps an Office of African American Achievement was too narrow a focus, and that if we were going to be addressing the issues of equity, that inclusion should be a part of that, and that office should be named so. So I think that's a good suggestion, and I hope that staff takes that into consideration when making decisions going forward. I'm going to step back into some of the things that Dr. Moore shared. Thank you for your questions, board members. I think they were excellent. It answered some of my questions. I'm going to address the awkward silence part of the talk that you gave today when we discussed school counselors. In July, when we discussed the budget with Dr. Moxley, I have continually asked about school counselors in our elementary schools. There are many empirical research studies that support the value of school counselors. Students who have greater access to school counselors and comprehensive school counseling programs are more likely to succeed academically and behaviorally in school. And this is especially true for students in high-poverty schools. So as we continue through this conversation, I'm going to ask a question now, and then I have some more questions, but what are your plans as far as school counselors are concerned in our elementary schools, and how are you going to make that happen in the school district of Indian River County?
Through the chair, that every school has a school counselor. That is the plan, regardless of where that school resides. They have a school counselor. Working through, making tough decisions, looking at what we are staffing, the amount of where we are staffing. We are going through a process or an exercise where we are scrubbing the budgets in preparation for what will be the opportunity to develop a values-based budget aligned to our strategic plan that defines our priorities and ensures that every nickel in this district is aligned to our priorities, and that we're making the difficult decisions that are in the best interest of children, and those decisions that are in the best interest of children are aligned to our priorities.
Wonderful. I look forward to having a budget to review with my fellow board members that includes school counselors for all of our children in our schools.
Thank you for your
Much
support.
like school counseling, there are many empirical research studies that show the benefit of later school start times. It's very interesting when I look at different studies. I've been doing, I have quite a focus on this, and when I look at the many different changes we can make for our students, a 1-hour delay in the start time of students in Florida Panhandle schools showed an 8% point increase in math scores, which is equivalent to about 3 months of learning. It's significant. When I review the African American Achievement Plan, I do not see school start time being addressed as an action. And my question today would be, are we going to begin to hold this value to be true, that school start time is too early in the school district of Indian River County and may be inhibiting student success? And if we are seeing around the country that later school start times are increasing student achievement, I'd like to know what our plans are going forward in addressing school start time and why it wasn't included as a tool in the toolbox when addressing the achievement gap in our schools.
Through the chair, the data or the research is overwhelming. This is the African American Achievement Plan. It is built into the 90-day process. It is something that we're looking at. I said prior to December, information hasn't changed regarding the opportunities really to evaluate where we are, how we start schools. There are logistical concerns that need to be addressed. There are conversations that we will embed into or push back out to the community as we move into phase 3 of the plan. Has not been forgotten. Research is too strong not to reopen that conversation moving forward. So that it is something that we're looking at.
I recognize that it may be that there's some potential for some difficult conversations, and it will be difficult change. However, rather than focusing on the disruptions, it's my hope that this school district will consider the ongoing costs of not adjusting schedules to meet the physiological needs of our students. My final point is regarding after school, before school care, and it kind of does work our way into school start time information. Today, we were at a county commission meeting where there was a discussion regarding Children's Services Council, and that about $400,000 or 25% of Children's Services goes to health or educational programs. Some of those we benefit from in this school district, or our students benefit from. There was some conversation by the county administrator about the fact that there are some of our teachers being paid with some of those funds to do after-school programs. And so I just like to bring up in 1.39, when Mrs. Berenborg talked about after-school programs, will there be, I look forward to, and I guess my question is, where are we going to move as far as the school district of Indian River County taking a little bit more control in the implementation, in the creation and implementation of after-school programs for our students, specifically African American students?
Through the chair, I just want to fast forward to probably the first week in June where we bring the reorganization. As mentioned before, we control access to a lot of these wraparound services. We will incorporate a process that I've mentioned before where it's called impact reviews. For students who receiving services beyond the confines of the school day, whether it be before school, embedded into the school day, or after school, we have the opportunity to evaluate the impact. And if an organization is providing a service without providing an impact, then we need to evaluate the access that we're providing, regardless whether it's something that we fund or an outside organization funds. We need to provide our children with the highest level of support where a validated impact is taking place. So really looking forward to engage in those conversations. Once again, this is yet another difficult conversation that I am going to have to engage in with the community, in which I may make some people uncomfortable, because the reality is we need to provide the absolute best to our students. And we need to evaluate the access that we're providing in order to ensure continued access is dependent upon the positive outcome to a child. And it's just not, it's social, it's emotional, it's school attendance, it's academic outcomes, it's behavior, it's a multitude of data points that we need to be evaluating in order to determine who we're providing access to. Some of that information will come to you as we're looking through summer programming. And can we provide buildings, can we provide opportunities to maximize programming to reduce impact or cost for us as a district? I come from an organization that spends $0 of general fund on summer school. That's not what was in the budget that you all approved at the beginning of this school year. So are there opportunities to look at our external partners to provide them at no cost to us different resources or facilities so they can offer their programming with the known that we're going to evaluate the impact, the improvement of the academic reality or the behavioral reality of that particular child. So really looking forward to doing that work. I believe it to be a game changer when we have a standard of service for anyone who steps inside of our schools.
Wonderful. I'd just like to say, I know Mrs. Zork has put a lot of importance on extended day and of the impact of our extended day. And as we look at some of the barriers that we have sometimes with getting students to after-school services, including transportation, the loss of time, I look forward to the school district really analyzing that we have these students in our classrooms in our schools. They're at our locations. We've worked with the students all day. Perhaps we know best where their deficits might be, and we can address those. And I hope to be able to work going forward to create really solid after-school programs in the school district of River County, whether they be funded by external partners or internally, that we have the direction and control over in order to maximize the potential our students have to be successful.
Through the chair, you'll be pleased with what we bring.
Thank you.
Okay. Board members, I have a series of questions, but I appreciate Mrs. Justice. I feel like a euphoric moment here because we're actually agreeing heavily on the same issue. So I appreciate you bringing that forward about extended day. It's something that I've been passionate about since the beginning. I want to go back, Dr. Moore, to page 5 of the equity, the short report you have here. Development of a plan to eliminate out-of-school suspension. And the reason I'm going to bring this up is you and I have had extensive conversations about this, but I think it really needs to be highlighted because it's concerns that are being brought to me from teachers and parents. When a community member sees eliminating out-of-school suspension, through the eyes of some, what they're seeing is that we're not going to have discipline in the classroom, and it's going to interrupt the learning environment for other students. I know you and I've had this conversation. That's not, that's not what this says here, but I really need you to stress that what you're saying here, it's a phase-in plan, you're looking at modifying the behavior, and also I would like to ask you to explain what that means, and then also give me your thoughts on, does this mean until we have modified behavior, if we don't have a out-of-school suspension, are we looking at in-school suspension? So, speak to that.
Through the chair, it is a phased-in plan. It is looking at our current reality, knowing that we want to maximize opportunities for children to identify maladaptive behaviors and empower them with the skills and the ability to replace those maladaptive behaviors. We need them in school. We need them to have the support in shifting and modifying those particular behaviors. It is not, in no way will it ever be, a decrease in discipline or disrupting class. Ultimately, it is the improvement of. When you're bold enough to get to the root cause, when you're bold enough to address the root cause in 3rd grade for a child, the 4th grade, the 5th grade, the 6th grade, the 7th grade, the 8th grade, and so on, teacher doesn't have to deal with that disruption. And that disruption continues to grow. I come from a place, and I'll say it again, where we did not implement this the correct way. We have learned from that over the course of time. There are additional systems and partnerships that we need to develop. We do need to provide a place for students to go to learn these behaviors. The intent, once again, is not to disrupt. It is and will begin with the development from a district perspective and supporting schools, looking at indoor suspension programs, looking at student services, the impact student services and counselors have, the impact that indoor suspension has, looking at that in terms of frequency. If we're sending a child to the indoor suspension program, are we changing or modifying that behavior, or is it just a reward for the student to go there? The intent implemented over a 2, maybe 3-year period really is to build up the proactive on the front end systems and structures and programs to eliminate suspension and not disrupt and not allow chaos to ensue. So taking the time, quality instructional programs, make no mistakes about it, instruction drives discipline. In the classroom, instruction drives discipline. And I've seen a teacher go from writing 25, 30 referrals over the course of a first semester to writing none after we invested in that individual, in the structures and systems and the behavior management program, ultimately to be at one point prior to Christmas break saying, I'm done, I'm not coming back, I can't do this, to still being at the same school 8 years later, and considered to be a master teacher who conducts themselves in a model classroom. Truth be told. That's an investment on the front end. That's an investment in teachers. It's an investment in principals. It's an investment in structures and systems and the creation of a belief. It's pulling us together as an organization, looking at the data, very similar to school start times. Some of the initial conversations around school start times is, we looked at that. Did we look at it honestly? Did we really look at what the research is saying and the impact that it has? Can we just look away from it? Or do we really need to evaluate the possible opportunity to change our adult behaviors to improve the quality of services for kids? 2 perfect examples of what I was alluding to earlier, where I have to make difficult decisions that are going to make adults uncomfortable, and will need your support in making those decisions. So, Ms. Zork, to speak directly to the concern that your constituents are sharing with you, this is not a knee-jerk reaction. This is a thoughtful plan that will be implemented over the course of time. We're investing in teachers, bringing them along. I know quality teachers want children in their room, but they want them ready to learn. They want them happy. They want them understanding the expectations set by the adults in the building, led by the principal. So there is work to do, which is investment in all to move us to that place. But it is not, we wake up and school starts next year and the behavior that's been in place forever has ultimately just been taken away.
Okay.
I've already made that mistake.
Well, thank you for publicly repeating that. And I think it's probably something that we'll have to continue to repeat until the success, teachers and parents are seeing the success of the phase-in and the modifications of the behavior. One thing also I've talked to you about is my concerns for separating by gender our male and female graduation rates for our Black or African American males. To me, I think if we're not tracking that data, I think we're going to be missing out some links between how we're disciplining our, our males versus our females, because when I go back to our graduation rates, and I'm gonna, back to 2010, male 52.6, 2011, 57.4, male 58.9, and then when you go back and you look at, the discipline rates that were for African American males, you can see a correlation there with the out-of-school suspensions with the low numbers. So I just, I appreciate you adding in the separation here, but I'm not even seeing that in the appendix of male and female. So, but that is something that I still would like to see us make sure that we keep an eye on and we monitor.
Through the chair, we'll be able to do that.
Okay. All right. That's all my questions that I have. I think I've gotten mine answered ahead of time, but one final closing comment?
Yeah, I had a follow-up to what Mrs. Justice was talking about. I'm a strong supporter of guidance counselors in schools and of deans in schools. I think that we ought to take a look at a deeper study of that as well. Combined, we're going to see enormous improvements in our schools, especially with regard to discipline and obviously with academics. I'm also open to consider, and I've mentioned this before, further discussions on start times. I think that probably with the review of the master plan that is underway, and with a discussion of whether or not we are going to move towards rezoning our district, when all of that comes together, my thought is that a good look at school start time might actually work hand in hand with both master plan and rezoning, because if we're going to rezone our schools and if we're going to change the start times, we ought to do it together. We shouldn't do all of this change, a year or two apart from each other. If we're going to do it all, then I think moving forward as the vision might be
Through the chair,
to align it all, if that makes sense.
Start times,
Yeah.
grade configurations, grouping of students. As we walk into March 10th and I have the opportunity to present what we have learned, the reality, we really begin to engage in some really fun conversations. Will it be difficult for some to digest? Absolutely. But this team, under your leadership, wants to reinvent and recreate what learning looks like in the 21st century, preparing schools from space and how we're organizing and grouping children, to the choice initiative that schools are in the midst of, really taking some bold, courageous steps to reinvent ourselves and do it collectively as an organization, just not one person saying, hey, let's do this, but let's have a thought, let's inspire ourselves around that thought and create experiences that move all children forward. A lot of fun coming in the months ahead.
I'm looking forward to it. And my last follow-up was about after-school programs. I believe, just as Mrs. Justice and Mrs. Zork, and that after-school program, that we really need to look at how they're run. But it's not a coincidence that either the last meeting or the one before, I mentioned an opportunity for for outside organizations to adopt schools. And if we went to looking into whether some of these organizations might consider adopting a school, maybe they would be the ones who might be interested in also adopting an after-school program, maybe funding the after-school program under our, of course, under our direction. that makes sense. I don't want an outside organization to come in and say, you know, we're funding the school and it has to run our way without input from our own educators, obviously. That's just my personal thought on it, but I'm certainly open to outside organizations or the relationship that we can build with many who absolutely feel like they want to be a part of our schools, mentor our children, even possibly mentoring teachers. There was a discussion some time ago with regard to the equity plan that some African-American teachers needed more mentoring, possibly from African-American, maybe retired teachers or retired assistant principals or something along those lines in order to help us retain our teachers and keep them here. But I wanted to add that comment with regard to the after-school programs.
Good. I'm seeing consensus here, Dr. Moore.
Through the chair, just a quick update. We've had two separate meetings. One, an expectation-setting meeting where we talk about these are the things in which we've observed that we want to correct or modify. Then an initial debrief, kind of looking at the research regarding after-school programming, some of the flaws regarding implementation, and alignment of the services. There are some quick fixes that will be coming to you moving into next school year, higher levels of involvement from principals at school sites, higher levels of accountability from principals at school site regarding the design and implementation, streamlining some of the services, not streamlining some of the redundant clerical work and maximizing opportunities to provide social, emotional, fun, enriching, and academic interventions to students. We have them there. We have a captured audience. So we're really looking through designing a collegial way to enhance those opportunities, which will come to you in later months moving into next school year.
Dr. Schiff has I want to ask Dr. Moore first, when you're saying you're going to bring these suggestions to us, when do you think that will be? What month?
The first board meeting in June.
In June? Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Just a real quick thing, it's just a technicality on the upload. This, I'm not sure if this is a Nancy issue. The African-American Achievement Plan uploaded funny, and so it's missing pages 8 to 13, then after 15, it jumps back to 13. So for people who are watching this or other people who want to get a hold of it, the upload is incorrect. That's all. On the workshop, it actually has different problems on each one, but neither of them is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you could correct that just so that other people can get a hold of the proper report, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. So do you have any final? No?
No, through that, just very excited. Thank you for your feedback, all very, very valuable. Walking away from this presentation, very encouraged and very much looking forward to getting into that strategic plan and some of the work that will happen as a result of that.
Okay. So next we have compensation recommendations for non-bargaining employees, and we'll take a short recess after this.
Okay, all right.
Are you okay? You ready to go now?
No, I'm ready to go now.
Okay, go.
Through the chair, this is just a follow-up from work that was happening with Dr. Moxley, Mr. Fagan. This information was initially presented to you in December. Wanted to take the time really to understand the financial implications as well as consider feedback that you provided during that meeting in December. We now have had enough time go through where we've scrubbed, evaluated the budgets to bring to you on the March 10th meeting the opportunity to compensate two groups of employees that have not been compensated since the 17-18 school year. So the first is the non-bargaining employees. These employees will receive a 2.5% increase to their base salary. These are the folks who do not fall within a bargaining unit. They are our application support specialist, our food service managers, board specialists, executive assistants, food service managers, assistant superintendents, executive directors, and so on. You have that information in front of you. It comes at a minimal cost of $312,400. So these are very, very valuable employees that do significant work in this district, both in supporting school sites and supporting our children. So we're looking forward to getting them the compensation, not nearly as much compensation as they deserve, but given the fact that it hasn't been since 17-18, we're excited to bring this. Once again, with principals and assistant principals, they haven't been closed since 17-18 as well. We're replicating the package or compensation that was provided to teachers in the closing of the 18-19. So if you look at their performance pay, it is increasing both at the highly effective and effective rates for both principals and assistant principals by simply $100. So rather than $1,200 for highly effective, it would be $1,300 for principals. Effective for principals would go to $900 to $1,000. So it's very straightforward in what they're doing, and then an additional $600 general wage increase to their base salary. This is also a unit or a team in comparison to other counties, our neighbors. This will compensate them for this year and allow us the opportunity really to bring all of our folks under a contract. We're in the final stages of compensation or negotiations with the IRCEA. Very productive, open conversations and dialogue. Looking forward to hopefully closing that out soon, which would allow us to bring everyone under contract for the remainder of this year. That is the item as it appears.
Okay. Mrs. Justice?
Yes, thank you. There has been much focus paid by the governor and by the House and the Senate currently right now about teacher pay and teacher compensation. So as we look at this proposal for non-bargaining employees, my question to you, sir, truly is, are we competitive in our pay for assistant principals and principals? I recognize that we're going to be making some increases here, but when we talk about our neighboring districts increasing teacher pay and other non-bargaining employee pay, are we competitive in order to be able to attract and retain the highest quality professionals to lead our schools?
Through the chair, very concerned. When I say very concerned, both the neighbors to the north and the south have gone through a millage process where they're negotiating or increasing their salaries for their teachers, which don't have that information back yet, but it is going to, because we don't have that millage dedicated for recruitment and retention as they do. So as that information becomes available, there may be a very likely scenario where we go from what is currently the reality of being, based on my understanding, the highest paid teachers on the Treasure Coast to no longer being so. So there are opportunities really to work through this negotiation with our teachers union, leverage through cost savings, elimination of redundancies, really to begin to compensate our teachers the way they deserve to be compensated. We will have the advantage as session closes. There will be something for moving up beginning teacher pay up to $47,500 or $50,000, depending on where that falls, in additional money, not nearly as much, left over to negotiate or compensate remaining teachers. That opens an opportunity or window for us as we go into what will be our budget development process and the renewal of what will be our millage.
So my question specifically was about leadership. So our assistant principals and principals, are we compensating them at a level where we are competitive, where we are attracting the best and the brightest of leaders and retaining our good leaders?
I'm sorry. I thought you were asking about teachers and and I left that principals and assistant principals. Also very concerning. I think there's a great deal of disparity of our pay of assistant principals and principals in comparison to both our neighbors to the north and the south. And looking at the caliber of the individuals who are leading our schools, we are exposed. We're exposed. These are some quality individuals who are doing some very innovative things. They have not received the quality or level of support that they deserve to be receiving. We're fixing that. We're correcting that. But as we move into next year, we need to consider a compensation for all of our employees. But that is an opportunity where I would consider us to be exposed.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
I do. Some leaders were given a raise, an increase before Dr. Rendell left. Where do those leaders fit in the equation with this proposal?
Through the chair, depending on where they fall, they'd be under the non-bargaining unit. So those positions would fall within the non-bargaining. If we're talking about the same positions, I know that we are. So this item comes the 10th, so we'll have opportunities to look through what the potential impact would be.
But they're not getting a second raise, is that right?
Through the chair, we would have to look through and see what the impact was. There's additional research that I need to do regarding the amount that was received and the rationale. So I know this was issues that Dr. Moxley addressed, wanting to bring that to closure. I need to get a better grasp on what that reality is to make a solid recommendation to you that is fair to all people.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for, is what is fair, because we have a lot of leaders, God bless you, who work just as hard. I don't understand what Dr. Rendell did before he left or why, but that wasn't so long ago, and I don't think it would be fair to district leaders if some have just received a raise last year and are going to receive another while others did not. We've had this conversation before, so that concerns me greatly. So I'd like a little bit more clarity on what that looks like, and so that we can avoid not being fair.
Through the
across
chair,
board.
item comes on the 10th, so that's part of the reason we go through this structure.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Nope. I've exhausted my questions with you prior and with Dr. Moxley at the time. Any final
No, ma'am.
comments?
Thank you. This is an item that will come on the 10th.
Okay, perfect. All right, if you don't mind, I would like to take a 10-minute break, and we'll come back at 2:52, or let's say 2:53. Gentlemen? Thumbs up? We're going to call this meeting back to order at 2:54. We are in our superintendent workshop, and we have 2 more items on the agenda, and I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Moore. We have the 2019-2020 Indian River E-rate program. Go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am. This presentation will be provided by Mr. Ron Fagan, Chief Financial Officer.
Good afternoon, Board, through the chair. What this is a brief sheet for an item that will be on March 10th. What this is an opportunity for the district to participate in the federal E-rate program. And basically what that is a program set up by the federal government many years ago, back in 1996, that allows schools and libraries to stay ahead and stay competitive and have the latest and greatest technology enhancements to the schools and libraries. What this outline is going to be for is where we're going to be buying switches and networks for our internet access services. So it's all basically infrastructure work. It's not laptops, it's not computers. It is strictly infrastructure. What this program allows us to do is basically purchase $1 million worth of equipment, but only pay $200,000. There's 2 ways the program works. One is we buy all the material and we get the direct E-rate back. Second option is where we work with vendors. They participate in the E-rate program. They buy the materials, but we ultimately only pay them $200,000. Either way, we still get the same benefit. What we're asking the board to do on March 10th is to agree for us to go to the next step. We have to have board approval before we can begin the process to seek solicitations. Once that comes in, solicitations go out. That's a hard word for me. Money, that's easy. Once that goes out, we will get responses back. If the responses don't meet our needs, we do not get enough, then there's no deal. There's no commitment on the district unless the RFPs come in, they are rated and evaluated to be acceptable to us based on terms and conditions. Once that happens, then we pull the next trigger on the E-rate process.
Okay. I do have a question, but go ahead.
Dr. Moore, I have a question for Mr. McDonald, who is sitting at the end of your table, but this is kind of a new setup. So how would you like us to ask, should I ask the question through you, and then you will direct staff, or may I ask Mr. McDonald directly?
I'm sure he'll be happy to answer the question.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm doing, I want to make sure that I'm doing that appropriately, and if you're not the right person to answer that, please let me know. I feel, or I remember that we've invested in a lot of technology and switches and different things in the past, and I know that technology is extremely expensive and constantly changing, and there's a need to stay current. But I do remember that the board has spent a significant amount of funds, a lot of the millage, the 0.6 millage for technology on switches and infrastructure work. So if you could just articulate what the need is in order for us to move forward. I like a sale, but just because it's on sale doesn't mean you have to buy it, so.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
We did spend millage on some network switches, and that was actually part of the E-rate. We did, not only did we spend some of it, but one of the purchases was for E-rate funding. We paid for it out of our pocket, and then we got reimbursed for it. So that was one piece to it. So this is for equipment that is still in our schools, that is almost, is that off?
Yeah. I almost said
How about
something.
that? Any better? Better one, better two?
There
we
you
go.
There you go.
All right.
Welcome to the world.
Hey, okay. So these are for switches that are almost 10 years old that are still out in our schools. Almost every desktop has a 1 gig connection to them, or we call it endpoint. These are 100 base T, so they're almost 10 times slower. So they're out of compliance, they're old, they're not getting updates. So the replacement for this E-rate is for that purpose.
Thank you.
Okay?
Okay. So I just want I'm sorry, go ahead.
Through the chair, just 2 other comments. One, the use of these funds will be capital funds, not general operating funds. And number 2, the plan ultimately is when buying this stuff early, you delay a cost later on down the line.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the E-rate, but I will say this, that, you turn around and you purchase it, and then it's obsolete really quickly.
Right.
So how much into the future can you look at these, that they're going to be used for us, and that we're not going to look at turning around and buying them again in 2 years?
Sure. The anticipated lifespan to these are 7 to 10 years, just like they have existed in our schools now for almost 10 years. The same time frame would apply to these.
Okay, so knowing that technology changes all the time, who's doing the forecasting on looking at what technology we might purchase that will be supported by these?
Okay. In this environment, for these switches, as long as we have the bandwidth necessary to support the endpoints, there has been very little in technology that drives that much horsepower that we would use up. We have a certain amount that goes out to the internet, and then we have the things that we communicate within our district. Based upon that, what we have going out to the internet is so much smaller than what we have internally, and that's what these devices are for, is to support the communication internally. So I don't anticipate these growing, beyond our needs anytime soon. And so,
Okay, so one thing I will tell you is, because when I was a principal and we had something improved like this, what I said is, this is wonderful, but we didn't have the computers that had the capacity. And so now we had a lot of outdated computers. So are we looking at also computer purchases along with this?
this does not impact the computer purchases, other than if we had a device that could support it, they would be able to take advantage of the new connections. One advantage is when we have to image computers, which is pushing out updates and everything else, they are able to get much faster, so that when we push out, say, 200 updates or 200 computers, they're all updated much faster overnight or during the day or whenever we have to do that. Trying never to interrupt classroom time, obviously, but.
Okay, and one more question on that. So are we looking at the waves, the technology waves like we've done in the past? Are we considering that, okay, now we're looking at these switches, we're going to approve these, so we're looking at the waves a little bit differently?
No, these are just more to make sure that right now they're not getting any updates from the vendors. So they're that old, and so for security compliance, as well as just to make sure that we are all standardized, so that when we're like, why is this wing updating computers much slower than this wing? It's like, at least we know they're all at the same level, all getting the same firmware, same security updates, that at least we're all standardized throughout the district.
Okay. So my question is, we do have the millage right now for technology. With 200,000, that is a significant number. Is there a reason why we're not using the millage money to purchase this?
Through the chair, since this is an allowable capital purchase, common practice is to use capital as much as you can. And I generally, what I have left over in the critical millage, using to cover salaries and benefits for ongoing teachers. And also CTE, and also I have about a group of teachers art, music, and PE that are paying out of critical millage and other technology equipment.
So we're maxed out with the millage money, is that what you're saying?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. When I'm looking here, E-rate discounts are based on schools' participation in the National School Lunch Program and its urban and rural status. What exactly does that mean, and its urban and rural status? What are they looking for?
I'll have to defer to Mr. McDonald. No?
Yeah, what they're looking for is to, that's where we get our discount from. And they look at our free and reduced lunch status, and based upon what that is, and they also have some districts or whatever, because it's a United States program, it could be your area is a rural program, and you can go through and say, we are 100% free and reduced lunch without actually going through a free and reduced lunch program. So that's why they kind of say it's a little mixture of whatever program it is. And in our district, we're approximately 80% free and reduced lunch for this purpose. We're asking for, well, what we've gone out to request for the vendors is up to $1 million in equipment. We specified the equipment. However, we're hoping that they come back with a bid that is much lower than that. So therefore, whatever they come out with, let's say maybe out of the $1 million they bid and come in and say it's only $800,000, so we would only have 20% of that. So it may not be a full $200,000.
Just my personal opinion is, when I look at federal grants or federal programs, I'm always looking for what is the catch here, because is there something that I'm not seeing here that we're agreeing to, that we're gonna do, that it's not clear to me right now? Or are they really, out of the generosity of their heart, really wanna create school?
Through the chair, Based upon the program set up by 1996 by the federal government, no ma'am, there is no catch.
Okay,
As long as you comply with the terms and conditions of the process, of which we use a third-party vendor to help us with, as long as you comply, you pay 80%. I mean, excuse me, you only pay 20% of the
Okay.
purchase. This has been an ongoing program for many years. There is no catch as long as you comply with the terms and conditions.
okay, that's all my questions.
Can I ask one more? Is that the cap? Was that purchase that you're looking at, or could you consider computers with this?
We cannot. They are very descriptive as to what they allow. It is purely network
Okay.
equipment. It's, the whole intent is to make sure that everyone in the district, schools and libraries can connect
That's
to
the
the internet.
infrastructure? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
All right. No further questions, no closing comments from the cabinet. We will move on to the final topic, D, the instructional calendar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the chair, this is our final item for the day. It is coming back with some additional feedback and thoughts for you to be approved this evening. This is the 2021 school district calendar for the Indian River School District. Just to kind of recap some of the information that was shared last time, this was a thoughtful process through a committee approach. A committee of 10 teachers, 5 parents, 8 staff, conducted 7 meetings that started as early as October, really looking forward or digging into what are the requirements to establish a contract to meet the needs of our unique county. There are state statutes that need to be considered. There are district or local contract requirements that need to be considered. There are start dates. There are a minimum number of minutes. So there are a number of logistical points that need to be considered in the establishment of a contract. Not to consider, or also to consider holidays that vary from district to district regarding standard practice or historical preference, one of which we'll talk a little bit later in my presentation. Feedback from the committee was very positive, so they were very appreciative to have the opportunity really to dig in, conduct surveys. I think they had just over 300 surveys completed, where they were thoughtful enough to go out and seek additional information regarding some points that they have discussed during their committee meetings. This calendar does meet all of the state requirements, all of the negotiated contract requirements that is being presented to you. There are some things that I find very positive in regards to this contract. An example for me is there are 5 full days committed to preparation and planning prior to the arrival of students. That is something that is new to me. What I was conditioned to when I was a teacher in the district in which I came from, you had 2 days. And then you basically gave up your entire weekend because 2 days was just not enough before students had to arrive. So I'm very thankful and thoughtful that this has been a practice in this district for a very long time, and I'm sure our teachers and administrators are very excited to have that time available to them as well. Also unique is this calendar, whether it was an intentional or not, does maximize days from the return of the winter holiday leading in to the assessment. And I think that's very valuable as we prepare students to take the end-of-year assessments or the EOCs or FSA assessments. This calendar does accomplish that. So there are also opportunities for me to continue to explore through negotiations and conversations with our union. So one of which I have mentioned a number of different times is the modified instructional day in which students are dismissed early. That is very, very meaningful time. That is time that we negotiate and find value in to have that dedicated time for professional development for our teachers. As we dig in and look at the data on that particular day, I look at the teacher attendance rate. And unfortunately, that teacher attendance rate is 2 percentage points lower in comparison to a regular school day. And I begin to question and wonder why that is. What's the root cause of that? So there are opportunities to really explore that moving forward through the dialogue and conversation with our teachers union. My commitment to our teachers moving forward is that we will provide the most meaningful quality development during that time. So one of my wonderings is 2% reduction in teacher attendance because they just don't see value in the afternoon development time. And if that's the case, then it's on me to ensure that we fix that and we provide them with quality development during that time. Another wondering I have is the configuration of how we're spending our time, which Board Member Justice mentioned in our previous conversation. Students are running through the confines of their entire schedule in a 3-hour or just about 3-hour reduction in school time, moving every 12, 14, 17 minutes. It's not the best use of time. So that's an opportunity, because that also is a requirement within our contract that our teachers are seeing their students every day. That is an opportunity to explore. When I look at a student attendance on that particular day, I thought my assumption was that it was going to be very, very low, and it was just 0.2 percentage points off, 0.2. So there was no variance, which was shocking to me. So those are opportunities really to explore. I want to maximize the opportunity that we have to develop our teachers. And I want to maximize instructional time, which brings me to the second opportunity that I will like to explore in future contract negotiations or calendar development. And that is the early dismissal days at the end of each semester. This is something that's probably been in the contract for a number of years. We have EOC exams that take place prior to the end of the 3 days. We do have in our pupil progression plan a stated language that refers to semester exams for our elective courses that don't have EOC exams, so that time is available. So when you look at that reduction of time, that's 6 days, 3 hours, that's 18 hours of instruction that we are losing. So it is an opportunity really to have conversations about reducing the amount of assessments, not just assessing for the sake of assessing, but using assessments to inform instruction, and if possible, maximize the amount of time we have to teach our students. And those are some conversations I think Mr. Meyer will address. You have the assessment committee as well. Right? We will kind of look at assessments, so that work has already begun. Also, there was conversations around Veterans Day, and it was the committee did the work, listened to feedback, made the recommendations, and then heard from the Veterans Council that they would like to have school on that particular day, so we can have programming and be intentional around the awareness and importance of that particular day. We have circled back through Mr. Teskey's office. Mr. Teskey has had a number of conversations regarding the programming that we'll be offering on that day and how we will stand in respect and reverence of our local veterans as well as veterans across the nation. So I'm going to ask Mr. Meyer to go in a little bit more detail regarding the servicing and content around Veterans Day.
Good afternoon. So I'm very excited to get to address the board for the first time. A little nervous. You can always tell when something means a lot to you because you're nervous and you feel energized by it. So it's an exciting time for me for my first little presentation. So each and every day I find something new to be excited about here, being a member of the School District of Indian River County. When we began to have the conversation about Veterans Day, what I quickly found was that it was something that has been celebrated here for years. And as a veteran, that just warmed my heart. So unfortunately, across the state, not everyone was honoring veterans as they should. So you may know that 2 years ago, the Florida legislature made an amendment to put that as part of the required instruction in section 100342. So now it is a piece of required instruction that all districts are required to provide education around the Medal of Honor Day, Memorial Day, and Veterans Day. But what I found coming here was that you guys were already doing that. So we're, of course, going to continue that tradition. For reference, Medal of Honor Day is actually coming up, so we sent a reminder out to our schools to make sure that they are providing instruction prior to that on March 25th. And of course, Memorial Day is in May. But Veterans Day, near and dear to everyone's heart. I look very much forward to being a part of this, being committed to that, that community spirit that we have here in Indian River is certainly something that we should all be very proud of. So the intent there, since the legislator's intent is that if school districts choose not to be in school on the 11th, that we would do something on the 10th. So each and every one of our schools will be participating in veteran-related activities. We will make sure that we reach out to all the local veterans communities and have them on campus. I know we have a number of members of our district staff who are veterans, and I myself will be in as many schools as possible during those days, and then on Veterans Day itself in the community for parades and such. So very much looking forward to that.
Okay?
So that information has been communicated to the Veterans Council. Mr. Chesky has spoken and shared some of the innovative and creative and really just the volume of initiatives that we will initiate over the course of the year, but as well as that particular year. Board members, that is the item as it is presented, and be willing to answer any questions you may have.
Go ahead.
First of all, I'd like to thank the committee for all their hard work. They diligently went through those 300 different comments, which was wonderful, or 300 different sets of comments. And thank you for your service, and thank you for following up with the Veterans Council. So thank you for your service and your service to our country. Couple things. Could we upload this when we upload it, and once it's passed to the website? It's kind of buried. I will say, as a parent, as an employee, that's something I go to a lot, and I do it as a school board member as well. I go to this, and it would be really nice to have it on the front page of the website. So if we could do that along with the fact sheet, or a button to the fact sheet, because I know they painstakingly created a fact sheet so that people could understand why we had the certain days off and why things were decided, which I thought was wonderful that they addressed almost every comment that came in. And thank you for adding what Mrs. Rosario asked for, which was this explanation of the modified instructional day, being students' early dismissal day. The one thing I noticed is the days and grading period, if you'll look, which I don't remember this on the other calendar. Was it on the other calendar? Okay. So if you look at,
These versions of this, not.
right, not on the
previous years.
that's what I'm saying. I haven't noticed that in previous years. But if you'll look at this, the first and the second quarters, we have 85 school days, and this third and the fourth quarters, we have 95 school days, which is 10 days difference, which is 2 weeks of school difference. So if you take a semester class in the fall, you have 2 weeks less of class time than you do in the spring. So I just wanted to kind of make a point that we might want to look at that for next year's. And thank you for all your hard work on this.
Okay. Go ahead.
I would like to, thank you so much, everyone, for all of your work on this. Dr. Moore for bringing this forward, and yes, to the Instructional Calendar Committee. But a comment that Mrs. Barenborg made with regard to finding the instructional calendar on the website, just to prove that point of how difficult it is to find it. Right now, and I've had this conversation with the previous superintendent on multiple occasions, with Dr. Moore, with Dr. Moxley Moore. Oh my gosh, all these superintendents. With Dr. Moxley as well. We
That's
will no
reassuring.
longer have anyone but you, Dr.
Thank
Moore. Or maybe I shouldn't. Oh, I'm prophesying. All right, I digress. In the search bar on the website, I entered in instructional calendar. And just to prove a point, the first 3 items that show up say instructional calendar. One of them, the very first one, or 2 of those links have nothing. You open it up and it says nothing. The pages are empty. And the third link for instructional calendar is an actual calendar of events for the entire district, but but not the instructional calendar as we see it for even this year, never mind the new one. So I've had a conversation with our, with why links do not show up when we put them in the search bar even. I think that's incredibly important. And also to tie together, I've tried to look for your page as well. And it's, unless you can click, 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 then we find superintendent's webpage. With this same, I've always wanted a page, a direct link, superintendent's link on the left when you come down on the menu bar, so that superintendent's link can be right there, rather than go through click, 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 click. Because obviously, you know, as the CEO, I think it's incredibly important. So this is something that I've had emails from parents and phone calls of where is the instructor? So if we could take care of that, it would be great. I see you're looking over.
Through the chair, just
Mr.
because we had
Bass.
that exact same conversation yesterday regarding where you can find the superintendent's page on the home page. We are adding a lot of content to the web page and in the process of cleaning out the web page. And when I say adding information, all of our documents, all of our procedure manuals, finding a home for them on the web page. So it is not, unfortunately, the easiest site to navigate. I may have made that a little harder because I'm throwing information out there as we develop and design. So we just had a conversation yesterday of going through a process to clean out and organize the web page. So over the course of time, that concern that you just mentioned will be addressed. As soon as this item is approved, our public information officer will be all over it and pushing it out, getting it on the web page, putting it on social media, letting our community know that this is out and ready for everyone to plan their spring breaks and summer vacations now that they have this information.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but a conversation with, or a follow-up, please, to the search bar. The keywords in the search bar are not searching items when you put them
Yeah.
in there. And that has to be fixed.
All right, that one I'll have to look into.
Go ahead.
Just to clarify exactly what you're looking for about the superintendent's office for his page, there is a link on the main page under the I Want To menu that says superintendent's office. And when you click on that, it brings you directly to his page with his calendar and executive leadership. Is there something different that you're looking for? And it might not, if you're doing it on your phone, the view is going to be different on your phone.
That's what I'm talking about. So
Okay.
the view on the left, but even on the top, we should still see, he should be there. I mean, he is the CEO. He is leading the charge of our entire district. It should be easier to find his page. But on the phone, when you see the top left menu that pulls down, it would be, if we could see him there, or, you know, superintendent, click that very simply. I mean, it should be easy to find his page rather than searching for it. In my opinion, it should be much easier to find his page.
We have
We're on
Mrs.
it.
Justice and then Mrs. Berenborg.
One of the
And then
things
Dr.
that,
Schiff.
when Mrs. Zork and I joined the board in 2016, if you think this website is difficult to navigate, you should have seen the last one. So we are continuously making improvements. I think Mrs. Rosario brings up an excellent point. A lot of our families access information about our district on their phones. A lot of Americans access information all the time on their phones. Many do not have computers at home, laptops, iPads, or any of those things. So I think it's important that when we're looking at how we're communicating with parents, that we pay attention to the way that our website looks and feels on the phone. The follow-up to that would be our app. When Mrs. Zork and I joined, there was also an app. It was largely to access focus. your students' information would come up immediately when you started the app, and that was good. It was a good way to connect our families with their student information, but I still think that the app is something that hasn't been utilized to its fullest ability. And as we continue to look at new ways to communicate with our stakeholders, our parents and community members, I don't know if that's the correct avenue to go in working with the app. I've wanted as a parent, I've seen a benefit to being able to personalize the app so that the information that you're receiving from the district is more specific to the way that you're engaging with the school system regarding the age levels of your students and those types of things, the resources that might be available within the community to you because of the age of your students. So I don't know, is it the mobile website that needs improvement and the app is not something to pursue? Are other districts utilizing their app in a way that's really improving their communication with parents and with families? I don't know the answers to those questions, but I ask that of you, Dr. Moore.
So through the chair, we'll provide an update regarding that. If you're asking my preference, the app is the way to go. It is the way in which most people throughout the United States are accessing information. When you're interacting or you're a client with a system, rather than just receiving information, push notifications, unique experiences at particular school sites, looking at school grades, the use of an app coming from a district that had a strong presence with technology, and the app was the one-stop shop for employees, teachers, and parents.
So you just said such an important word. You said client. And when we can't look at schools as business in a lot of ways, but we certainly can from a customer service perspective. Parents and families are our clients. They are our students, right? They are our customers, excuse me.
Right.
So as we move forward through advancing in technology and user interface with the school district and our constituents, I hope that we keep in mind that they are our clients, and it is really our responsibility to make the experience enjoyable, easy, fun, engaging, all of the things that we want for our students in our classrooms. I'd really like to take the perspective when we engage with our parents to have that same type and level of interaction.
Agreed.
Okay.
I have a quick question. It's to Mrs. Maddox. Is that okay?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, thank you.
here
So
in service
are you
of-
going to put up the schedule or the, with the word, I guess once we approve it, it doesn't need draft anymore, but it'll be in big letters 2021 so that it will, or can you put up both calendars for this year, next to next year's? Because what'll happen is people will pull it up and think it's this year's calendar. And also, are you going to put it under the I want to?
So that's a question for the webmaster, Lori Webb. She can look at the page and actually see where there is space. That goes back to some of the things that are being requested to be on the main page. We have to pick and choose which
Right.
ones are the most important.
You run out of room.
So I'm sure that there's a way to display it properly and so that there's not any confusion, but I'd have to sit down with Lori, and I have all of the requests written down, and we'll figure out the best way to put it up.
Yeah, I would suggest though that we have both, because I think,
Right.
you know, people look at it and they don't notice that it's next year.
Okay, no
Okay.
problem.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead. Dr. Moore, please forgive me for not noticing this earlier. But last year's, or rather this year's, school instructional, district instructional calendar indicates when graduation for the high schools are. It's on the calendar itself. So it was revised in September of 2019, obviously, so the calendar was approved and then revised, I'm assuming revised to add the graduation dates to it. So are we going to have another revision at some point with the graduation dates for next year added to these calendars? Because there's no calendar date, graduation dates
So-
on here.
Through the chair, we haven't
Does that make-
established graduation
Okay.
dates for next year.
Okay.
I'll have to do some research to say, when we updated because of the hurricane, maybe I don't know if that was standard
Yeah, I'm not
practice.
sure.
Obviously, we want everyone to know when our high schools are graduating. So I'll have to do some research as to
Mm-hmm.
why, if that's intentional or not. I just don't know.
I don't know, but I just noticed it now, so.
Dr. Schiff?
Couple quick things. Yeah, ditto on the difficulty finding the calendar. It's actually easier to just do a Google search than it is to go to our website. That's how I usually have to find it. The November 2nd, no school day, is there any significance behind that? It seems fairly random. I know we added some in. Is there, that day will be no school at all unless it's an emergency? Is there anything to why it's that day?
Through the chair, the intent was to have one on each side of the semester. That is another opportunity, as I looked at the calendar on the back end coming in new, that I really think we could be doing that more intentionally versus having a scheduled day off, having a day in which we would not have off. So we will be doing some programming around that day as well. That was my initial response. Moving that one particular day opened up a whole can of worms, and as I said, can of worms. Didn't want to undo work that was collectively done and collegially done, but did want to say, and I should have mentioned that in my opening comments, that methodology of identifying a day off in case of, I think we could do a better job moving forward in doing it another way.
Ditto, I agree. What it does is it creates a long weekend on the Halloween weekend. It just happens to be Halloween. I'm sure that's not the significance, but it seems fairly random, and I know that the committee went through a lot of work, so like you, I don't want to question or undo that, but I don't get like why my kid is off school that day.
Agreed.
Shoot, now I forgot the second thing I was going to say.
Can you ask my question when you come back?
Yes.
Okay. I do have two dates, and I apologize ahead of time because it's something that as you look at it more and more, questions come up. Let me ask you on September 28th, holiday, no school. Can you, and I've been looking up September 28th. Can you tell me what holiday is, and I'm,
It's Dr. Moore Day. No.
No, please.
well, what I was,
Yom Kippur.
Yeah, I was going to say, isn't it?
what is it?
Yom
Yom
Kippur.
Okay. Okay, that did not come up when I was looking. But my question is, when I look up federal holidays, well, why doesn't it say that there? Instead of just having holiday, it should have there specifically what the holiday is that we're observing. And that's just a minor, fix. And then also I go down to April 2nd, and it says holiday, no school. So I think we need to note in those two locations what holidays we're actually observing.
That's good, Friday.
Good point.
Friday.
Good Friday, but we,
It's in the fact sheet, I will say that.
Yeah, but I mean,
But
then
it's
you're,
not on here.
then you have another document that you've got to open when if you have an instructional calendar, it should be here. I agree.
Can-
through the chair,
What?
the fact sheet was
Yeah.
something that was added. Another practice that we could move to keep all of the information
Right.
in one location would be kind of an appendix where we go into explicit detail. I do think the committee took the extra step of trying to
Right.
provide additional information here. The more information you add, the muddier it gets. But we could probably, on the backside, have an appendix so everyone understands what and why.
Well, the reason I gave leadway to that, but when I went back, we specifically said Veterans Day, Thanksgiving, Labor Day, so
I
it's
agree.
just,
I agree.
But I'm looking here because I was looking for Founder's Day, and I was looking at when do we celebrate it, and I'm not seeing that on our calendar. And I was trying to figure out, are we abiding by Florida statute 1003.421 that says pertaining to Founders Month, celebrate Freedom Week and Constitution Day. It says to educate students about the sacrifices made for freedom in the founding of this country and the values on which the country was founded. The last full week of classes in September shall be recognized in public schools as to celebrate Freedom Week. So that's why I started looking at 28th. I didn't know which holiday we were recognizing there. Are we celebrating Founders Month or Founders Week? And if so, how?
Through the, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we have already began making sure that the district is in compliance with all the required instruction. And it's nice, it's another welcome thing, right, that I showed up and said, what are we doing with that? They showed me a product of how the district was already keeping track of that. That's how we knew we needed to make sure that we would provide the instruction around Medal of Honor Day. And so, of course, next year when September comes around, there will be a plan to ensure that we celebrate Founders Week as intended by the legislature.
Okay, perfect. That was just my question.
Great question.
Just the follow-up to what you mentioned, if that's, I have not noticed that, so thank you for bringing that up. But that says the last full week. Does it say the last full week in September? Just want a little bit of clarity.
Let's see. I'm sorry, the print is so small and I have a hard
I
time
heard you say
reading
the
it.
last full week.
It says, "The last full week of classes in September shall be recognized in public schools as Celebrate Freedom Week." And it goes on into it.
So that would be the third week.
That would be the third
Right.
full week, yeah, beginning the week of the 21st.
So I
Okay.
have, where, like in 2017, where Leon County, they put out what their resource packet to what they're doing, and they celebrated it from September 25th through September 29th. So yes, it's like the last week in September.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think we could develop an instructional calendar, I mean, not to approve, because I think what people want to see on this one pager is when we're having school and when we're not having school. I think maybe a separate calendar would be when we do these special types of events for required instruction, if someone wants to dig deeper. But we can't fit that all on one page. It's just going to be too busy.
I just want to say thank you for that. As a parent, the more we can connect our families to the curriculum in our schools, the better that we will be. And as a parent speaking in the school district, I would love to be able to have that. We're obviously in the know, but how lovely that the school district would give me something that would say, you know, during the third week of September, we'll be celebrating Founders Week, or the month of September. Here are some things that we'll be highlighting across the board in the district. Feel free to ask your kids about this.
Right.
Great dinner time conversation, connecting families with what we're working with their students in our schools. So thank you for that suggestion. I look forward to seeing that.
May
I finally, please?
And then Mrs. Rosario.
Couple things. One, which have now emerged in recent conversation. In response to Mrs. Berenborg's comment earlier about why the 10 more days in the second half of the term, I remember discussing this with Dr. Moore earlier, who responded at that time, it gives us additional time to prepare for exams, which he noted here, which is significant at the end of the term as we're preparing for EOCs and FSAs and all of those things.
But it's during the last quarter instead of third quarter.
Right, because that's when we're having all of those exams, so it gives additional time. That was the explanation that I got at the time when I asked that question. I did previously ask, similar to you, the question about the holidays, and we didn't have those noted. In light, though, really specifically of this conversation, what's coming up for me personally is, you know, everybody knows what December 25th is. Everybody knows what we're celebrating on December 25th. Everybody knows what we're celebrating on November 28th. It is not by accident we don't know what September 28th is. We don't know that a week before that is Rosh Hashanah. We don't know a variety of holidays that are not, for lack of a better word, I'm going to call them mainstream right now.
Good Friday.
Well, to be honest, in this county, most people know what that is. But I'll tell you, very few people in this county know when Yom Kippur is, or Rosh Hashanah, or some of the other less publicized holidays. That said, also, when we talk about Founders Week, and in light of our conversation about equity inclusion, could we please make sure that when we do that, we also talk about indigeneity, that we talk about indigenous rights, that we talk about all of the things that occurred inside of what we call Founders Week and the the ways in which we are attentive to the history of this land and the people on it. And I'd like to ask that we include that when we talk about founders, that we have a very broad, equitable, and inclusive approach to what we call founders. That's it.
Can I ask, what is the statute on that?
I can have Nancy send this out. Florida
Okay.
statute, 1003.421.
The reason why I ask is let's direct them to follow the statute, I think.
Uh-huh.
And if that's in the statute, we should already be following it.
And while we follow what's in the statute, we also, as the school district of Indian River County, get to expand on that and add what we as a district think is important to teach our students. I'm not saying we exclude what's in the statute.
Yeah, I
I'm not
think
saying we
that's-
don't pay attention to the
I think that's
statute.
another discussion, but.
Well, I mean, we go through instructional materials adoption. All curriculum that's being provided to our students is supposed to go under review. I would imagine the school make individual-based decisions. I've asked about this, about supplemental curriculum and how it's reviewed. I continue to have concerns about supplemental curriculum that is occasionally given out in our schools, and the approval process that it goes through. So, you know, I think this is, while it may be a different discussion, it's a timely one.
Thank you.
So, but I still will have this sent out because this particular one that I was looking at was Freedom Week for Constitution Day. But I'm hearing you, Dr. Schiff, so I don't know if I personally would like to mix those together, but we could look at another opportunity. Any other conversation?
So, just through the chair, some hanging chads maybe. We will bring an item prior to the opening of school years where we're looking at what we call the 19 required curriculums, when they're being covered, how they're being covered. I think what Ms. Justice says is 100% spot on. What Dr. Schiff says is 100% spot on. Those are additional statute-driven requirements that we need to be open and transparent about regarding how we're covering them, when we're covering them, and our intentionality around the depth in which we are covering them. So that will be an item that, you know, as that's what I learned today, you know, Jan, when I come home, that's one thing I learned today, that we don't have enough, we're not being intentional around the required 19 curriculums or contents that we're statutorily required to cover. So that, you know, put it on the list, for lack of a better way of saying it. Typically, in most districts, I think they don't list religious holidays here. That's why you don't see any of those holidays mentioned, but I think, as you know, Memorial Day, those are the identified holidays.
Madam Chair?
Is there a reason?
Separation, maybe?
Yeah.
Separation of
Yeah.
church and state. I mean, there may
Yeah.
be some effort to not put religious holidays on, and that's the reality of the education system in the United States. I just want to say quickly, because I think Dr. Schiff and I agree on some things, but we're going to disagree on this a little bit, because I'm going to go back to what Mrs. Barrenborg said about statute. I've shared before, and I'll just share it quickly again. My daughter brought home an article that was given to her in her AP Human Geography class that was from the Beijing Review regarding globalism. That was supplemental curriculum that was given and was taught in a classroom that personally, as an American citizen, I was not comfortable with, right? Public schools. So I just want to make that clear, that I do believe that there is curriculum that is being given in our schools as supplemental curriculum, and I do think that the time has come for us to address whether or not it is in line with what we're hoping to accomplish in educating our students and what the Florida legislature requires.
Agreed. Absolutely.
I think you're right. We need to look at that, and not just from a belief structure, but the impact on the students. We need to make sure that the curriculum and the materials that are being provided to the students are aligned to the standards. Because that's my bigger concern, is that if we don't have some sort of controls over what materials are being provided, we have students in Class A who aren't being given the same equitable education as students in Class B. So that's where the controls that I'd like to see. And Of course, we're going to dive in on this immediately, but we're going to have a lot of very deep conversations about our next instructional materials adoptions that's going to be required by the adoption of the best standards. So this is coming. I mean, this is something that we are going to be revisiting a lot.
Thank you.
And then the one more, sorry. But there are more days in the fourth quarter simply because there's more testing. That's when the state testing exists. So we are still required as a school district to provide instruction all year long. So there are going to be a couple of days that we just don't get to teach in that fourth quarter. It's the truth of the matter, but we still have to be able to deliver the instruction. So that fourth quarter, we need those additional days to make sure there's enough instructional time.
That is why I look forward to us looking at amount of testing. Thank you.
Yes.
Looking at what, mock?
Amount of testing that we're doing.
Okay,
Mrs. Zork, may I just make one last comment before we finish? Yes.
go ahead, and then Mrs. Rosario, then
Go ahead.
finish.
Just a quick follow-up to what Mrs. Justice mentioned, and what we were talking about with Founders Week and having it on a separate calendar. I'm not sure if this would fall under what Mrs. Maddox is working on. We briefly talked prior, and she said that she's working on a district calendar with all things happening in our district. Is that going to be different from an instructional calendar of events, or is that something that might be placed on the calendar that Kristen is working on now? I'm not sure, Dr. Moore.
So through the chair, the master calendar would be the keeper of all informations, a go-to at-a-glance view. The instructional calendar gives you a more explicit, detailed report regarding the content, when these 19 core curriculums, or not core, additional curriculums are being covered. So I think in the master calendar, it would cover it all, so you know that that's when it's taking place. What Mr. Meyer is envisioning, or what I am envisioning as well, is a little bit more explicit in regarding some of the content, the style strategies, where within the confines of the school day is it being covered, so a little bit more explicit.
Because I would kind of think that, on a calendar that I think Mrs. Maddox is working on, not completely separate from the instructional events calendar or curricular calendar, is that, something like Founders Week could be celebrated across the entire district, not just in our classrooms. And I think that there are some events that we can kind of maybe dovetail on some of these calendars just for an FYI from a district's, standpoint. Something like Founders Week is very important, but just a thought that I'd throw out there. And Mrs.
Oh, thank you. I stated the last time we discussed this calendar, and I'll state again, that I do not know that I will be able to support this calendar tonight. I appreciate the fact that you have highlighted your concerns and some of the changes that you hope to make, and I hope to be able to support you in doing those things. However, as a board member who is in her fourth year serving on this board, these are not new issues. Some of these things, modified instructional day, early dismissal day, early release day, you can call it anything you want. But I don't think it's what's best for kids, and I don't know that I'm going to be able to support an instructional calendar that includes that type of an item. So I will state that tonight, my concerns again, but I just wanted to be very clear, leaving this workshop today, that I still have concerns regarding that issue, and I do believe that in working through collaboration with our teachers union, I am hopeful that in the future we will be able to make decisions that are best for kids together.
Through the chair, understood, but in the current reality, I need to bring a calendar that meets the negotiated requirements. So as I said, those are opportunities, and I think our thinking is parallel regarding those opportunities for improvement, and I'm looking forward to working with the teachers union to bring a contract that we all can say, this is absolutely maximizes instructional time, reduces assessments, and we don't have exams that we're not taking within the contract. So there is work to be done. Some of that work will be tasked out over months, over years to correct. So this is the reality that I live in now. And as stated, I think there's opportunities to improve it.
And in the reality I live in now as an elected board member representing constituents, I will continue to advocate for students and families regarding this issue. So I understand your position, and I appreciate you bringing a calendar so that families can start planning for the future, but I will continue to advocate for this cause.
All right. Closing.
I have no additional items to present. Thank you for your time.
All right. With that, we're going to adjourn at 3:49. Thank you.